Hello. Welcome to episode 15, I believe. I always get confused of the If You Could See Me podcast. This is Erin Mahone, and I just wanted to give you a little heads up before the episode gets started. Today, I talked to Pamela Lynn Hock. She is amazing, incredible, inspiring, brilliant woman with an amazing story. She is a participant in the next iteration of the If You Could See Me project, which opens on June 7th here in Richmond at the Theater Gym in the Virginia Rep Center in downtown Richmond. We will also have some presence online in various capacities, of which are still being decided. But I am just every day more and more humbled by the incredible people who have joined me on this mission, on this journey. And we are still seeking sponsors. Thank you. I forgot the word. Oy vey. We are still seeking sponsors for this event. And I am happy to talk to anyone who's interested. You can also support us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/ifyoucouldseeme. You can contact me directly, Erin@ifyoucouldseeme.com. If you're interested in supporting us in some other way or getting more information, I would be happy to answer any questions anyone may have. We're moving right along. We have our last meeting before the big day this weekend. It's mid-May right now, and things are progressing, fortunately and gratefully. I am interviewing each of the individual women who are participating in this group, and so those will be going up weekly and some bi-weekly, depending on the amount of time that we have before now and the show. I want you to hear from all 7 of these incredible women before they stand on the stage and share their stories with you. Today, I wanted to read a little bit to you from the book before we get into this episode, from my book, If You Could See Me, Life, Motherhood, and the Pursuit of Sanity. I've been thinking a lot, I think a lot every day, about how to live appropriately in the 21st century and how, what are my responsibilities as a parent and a human being, and what role does technology play in my life, and what role does efficiency play, and how can I be more conscious of and intentional about the way I live my life. And so I've been thinking about this for a while, and it is reflected in this chapter of the book called Our Better Angels. There's so much noise right now. It's a constant chatter, buzzing, yelling, throwing insults and memes around as if they could be taken back. Something I learned very early in life is that you can't take certain things back. You can't unsay. Sure, apologies are important, and sometimes a good argument can even deepen a relationship if both parties can come through the battle having found common ground or built mutual respect. But there has to be a line. There must be a point of basic human decency in which winning is less important than honoring the humanity in the other person. It would be easy for you to think I was talking about politics. I'm not. I'm talking about life and the responsibility we have to teach our children that their words have power. Our kids live in a world in which it is very, very easy for them to grow up their entire lives without being held accountable for their speech, how they put their ideas into the world, and how they honor other people's experiences. The internet, social media, etc., make it so that if they don't want to, they never have to see the impact of their words. None of us do anymore. But the big difference is that we remember a time when there was accountability and our children do not. This weird new reality is a marker on the timeline of the life of adults who still remember life before Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. I am not a perfect parent by any means. Seriously, not even close. My kids have way more screen time than I am comfortable with. They talk about things that I don't even understand a little bit. So it's important to you. It's important for you to know that I am not preaching. I struggle with the complex moral and ethical questions of technology and parenting in this strange new reality of the 21st century as much as anyone. Making devices the enemy and going off the grid completely isn't realistic, at least not for me. The thing I want to teach my kids most of all is to find the middle way, to not live in a world of extremes, but find the path that understands that the confusion, pain, and discomfort in the world is just as important as happiness, meaning, and joy. We don't always get what we want. People don't always see our point of view, and we have to learn to handle disappointment and frustrations without being toxic, vitriolic jerk faces who stomp and hurl insults when things don't go our way. The internet provides a really interesting, if not exhausting, opportunity to help our kids grapple with the challenges of arguing gracefully or standing by their beliefs even when others disagree with them. Even on the internet, a place where you can ostensibly say whatever you want to whomever you want and have very few repercussions. There can be basic human decency. I'm always reminded of the very insightful quote of which I do not know the origin. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. My job as a mom is to instill the tiny voice in them that is a reminder in those moments that no matter how angry they are, no matter how squarely someone else's words and actions fly in the face of what they know to be true, there is a right way to say what they want to say. Maybe the right thing means they have to concede in the moment, to agree to disagree, to walk away and live to fight another day with their compassion and decency intact. I am reminded of a very powerful quote originated by Charles Dickens and made famous by Abraham Lincoln. So do the shadows of our own desires stand between us and our better angels. Thus their brightness is eclipsed. Winning at all costs is not the answer. The internet challenges that morality in a very deep way. We can look at it as a threat, or we can address it as an opportunity. We can remind our children and ourselves of our better angels, of the incredible light and beauty and power that exists in every human on this earth, even those with whom we fervently disagree. It is possible to fight magnificently and honorably for the things you believe to be right without forgetting the humanity of your enemy. It's hard, a lot harder than yelling insults and attacking people's physical traits, family, or other things that no one has any control over. Let's talk about ideas. Let's disagree. Let's walk away with our heads held high because we didn't allow our better angels to be eclipsed. In the end, I don't need for my children to believe what I believe or be a mouthpiece for me. What I want is for them to know themselves, to understand their own values in the midst of all the noise, enough to find love and forgiveness in those moments. When you become a parent, you have no idea what you're signing up for. It can become so incredibly overwhelming at times that it would almost be easier to take your kids and go live in a hole. But the world needs them to know how to navigate it. And we have to find a way to teach them these things that we are only just coming to learn. I hope that you enjoy this episode with Pamela Lynn Hock. I encourage you to look at her website, allforamy.org. She has an incredible burgeoning nonprofit organization that provides employment supports for individuals with intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities. And check us out on all of our social media, all of our web presence, and we look forward to seeing you on June 7th. Enjoy the show. Hello, friends and family, and welcome back to the 14th episode, I believe, of the If You Could See Me podcast. I am Erin Mahone, and I'm really excited this morning. It is morning where we are right now. Wherever you are out in the world listening to this, it may not be. But I am really excited to be here today with Pamela Lynn Hock. She is a mental health advocate and a brilliant human being doing wonderful work in the world. And I'm even more honored to have her a part of the next iteration of the If You Could See Me project, which opens on June 7th here in Richmond, Virginia, and online worldwide. Pamela, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yay! Well,
Yay!
I love excitement on a Sunday morning. We were just sitting here talking about how we're in our pajamas still, and we're drinking our coffee. I'm sitting underneath my son's bed, and we and we are going to be very relaxed and comfortable in this conversation. So, Pamela, why don't you tell me a little bit about, where are you from? What did your young childhood life look like? Who's Pamela when she was 7 years old?
Oh man, Pamela at 7 years old was awesome. That was like, people talk about the golden years of their life, and I'm sure as I go on, um, that I will find that I have different years that I like. But right now, 7-year-old Pam was an amazing shitstorm of a person. It was like, because at 7 years old, you don't care, you don't have a care in the world.
Right.
All you have to worry about is coming home for dinner on time. You know, we lived in a time where you could just drop your bike on the side of the road and run around run around at night and not have to worry about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, although my family hails from Downingtown, Pennsylvania on my mom's side. So I've always related more to Pennsylvania, but I grew up in Richmond, outside of Richmond, in a place called Midlothian, Virginia. Um, and my childhood, it's difficult. It's not necessarily difficult for me to talk about, but um, I had a very unique experience as a child growing up with a sibling with cerebral palsy. Um, she is 2 years older than me. Her name's Amy. And growing up, she's my only sister. Um, so, growing up, some kids have other siblings. I don't know. Do you have other siblings?
I have two siblings, yes.
Right. So growing up with like what we call typical um, siblings, people who are not developmentally or intellectually disabled, um, I imagined that it would be full of playtime and camaraderie and maybe some sibling rivalry. I didn't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a sister who was completely dependent on me and my mom and dad. But my mom, God bless her soul, worked, 80 hours a week as a nurse. She's been a nurse for 38 years. And she worked so much that I became kind of like the person that took care of Amy when she would come home from school or day program. Um, and we had fish sticks for dinner and kid cuisines. Like there was never any family home cooked meals where we were all together. Um, and it was just a very unique experience. Um, I couldn't have a lot of kids come over to my house. I couldn't have a lot of friends. I don't think I ever had a sleepover at my house because of Amy's emotional, issues because of her disorder. Um, but I wouldn't say that it wasn't an awful childhood. It was just very, very different.
Right.
And it's very hard to explain how it felt being the, the only sister of someone with cerebral palsy. But despite all of the problems and all the issues, I wouldn't change that for the world because my sister Amy is the light of my life. Um, she is a beautiful and wonderful, hilarious human being who has grown into this even more amazing woman. She's 30 years old. She lives in a cool house with some other people, and she's just come into her own personality that is just amazing to me. So, I mean, I guess that's what I would say about what my childhood was like. It's really hard to put into words.
No, I think you put it into, perfect words. You painted a really clear picture of, an atypical childhood. But I mean, it's interesting because yes, there are kids who have, everyday lives where, you know, they do the things that we expect children to do. But I do think that it's more frequent than not that people grow up in circumstances that they don't feel like they can describe, and um, you know, it is their normal.
Hmm.
You know, I imagine that you just kind of, that was just your life, and you know, at that age you didn't really think much about it. It just was what it was. Did you have, you know, resentment or frustration that, you know, you expressed at, you know, when you were younger?
I don't, I realized my resentment later on in life when I began uh, 12-step programs of recovery.
Mhm.
Um, but at the time when we were younger, I don't think resentment is something that children or even teenagers recognize or understand.
Right.
They just feel that something isn't right within themselves and they express it in various emotional ways. My way of expressing myself um, was to isolate.
Hmm.
Um, I Amy, being Amy's sister taught me a lot of good things as well,
Of course.
like how to. I never, I never thought of her as being different.
Hmm.
So, grade school interactions with other kids, and Amy had her own special education group, and I would see other kids making fun of them, and I couldn't understand uh, why.
Right.
I didn't understand why, and I would get angry. And I would stand up for her. I remember one time I was in like the fourth grade, and this kid said that his sister could beat up my retarded sister.
Ugh.
And I soccer kicked him in the shin, and, and I was sent to the principal's office and sent home for the day. But that's how it was. Is I was like, you don't talk about my sister,
Right.
you know. And but she taught me, being with her taught me how to not discriminate against other people,
Yeah.
how to um, you know, find things in people that were good. um, you know, but she was sometimes her own advocate without even knowing it. We would go to the mall and she'd take off in her wheelchair. When we got her an electric wheelchair, she'd take off in the mall, and we just let her go. And she would wave at everybody, and the kids would be looking at her. And even the parents sometimes would be looking at her sideways. And she would just wave at them and say, hi. And I remember one time this lady, I guess Amy, got in her way with her wheelchair. And she was like, can you ask her to move? And I was like, you can ask her yourself.
Right.
She's a person, and you know, you don't have to. I always dislike when people do that, when they talk to uh,
Right.
the parent or the companion or whoever is around the individual with disabilities,
Right. And
instead of
completely
talking
forget
directly
that
to the
that's a
person.
human being too.
Yeah,
You know.
it's like there's some kind of animal that can't talk and think for themselves. You know, that's how people treat a lot of individuals with disabilities. And but Amy, Amy gave me the strength to not care about those people.
Right.
I Because she didn't care. You know, I would get so angry and I would get so upset, and uh, she would just be smiling and laughing. I'm like, you know what, Amy, you're right. Why are we feeding into this hatred? And you know, it's just she's amazing, and she doesn't even know it. That's the funny part. She's amazing, and she has no idea. You know.
She's just being Amy.
Hmm.
Ah, so talk to me about how 7-year-old or young Pamela went from, you know, being primary caretaker to, you know, the more intense experiences that you had with trafficking and the causes of your PTSD that you talk so openly about now. Where did that transition happen?
So, like I said, 7-year-old Pam had no idea.
Right.
Um, and then we have 12, 13-year-old Pam.
Hmm.
Um, there was a shift at some point in time, and it's hard to like put it in a timeline,
Right.
where I became more distant from my family. I felt like because I had spent so much of my childhood taking care of Amy,
Right.
being worried about Amy, dealing with the emotional responses from my parents because of Amy, um, I wanted to I wanted to get away and be my own person. And so I did that through finding friends. I've never, I've always been friendly to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really had friends that I could say they were my best friend or they cared about me or anything like that. So I would develop these friendships with people. This one girl, I developed a friendship with her in middle school, and I would hang out at her house all the time. I would spend the night at her house, because I didn't want to be home. And she was different, you know. She smoked cigarettes and, you know, drank alcohol with her brother. And I got a different family experience from them.
Right.
You know, her mother was an alcoholic and her dad wasn't around. Her brother was significantly older than us and would have his friends come over. So um, one day, her brother, excuse me, was there, and a couple of his friends had come over, um, and they essentially, it started off with them joking about me being pretty and, you know, da da da, and then it took a really harsh turn. Um, I had a gun pulled on me, and but just skipping ahead, I was gang raped by him and his friends, in front of my friend, um, who did nothing to stop it or tell anyone. And I was subsequently threatened into having, you know, sexual relations with his friends and other people. And then it escalated to being sold. Um, and it was me and a collection of women from everywhere. They were a part of this network that is so incredibly difficult to explain, the economics of sex trafficking. And I say it like that. People are like, what do you mean the economics of sex trafficking? And I was like,
That's what it
I'm
is.
like, you know, it's a business
Mhm.
that, although criminal, makes money that gets put into our economy. And you don't understand how much money is made with the sex trade and gun trade and drug trade, um, and the trafficking of humans for labor. Um, it's a huge system, um, of very sick people,
Mhm.
a lot of greedy people.
Right.
So that's where that started. And so they threatened to murder my family, murder my mom and dad and my sister, because obviously they knew where I lived.
Right.
They knew where I went to school. Um, and so I lived like that for 4 years, um, in order to protect my family. I stayed at other people's houses a lot, um, but they allowed me to go to school. Not all the time, but most of the time I was allowed to go to school. I participated in sports, I played field hockey, but at the end of the day, I was a slave to, when they wanted me to do what they wanted me to do, I had to be there.
Mm.
Sometimes they would come to my house, and knock on the door like they were my friends
Right.
and say, you know, oh, we need you to come with us. And no matter what I was doing, it didn't matter. I had to go. And I remember one time they came to get me, and I went into my sister's room, and she was sitting there listening to music, and I just sat with her and I hugged her. And everything that I did was to protect her
Right.
and my family.
Mm.
Um, but that's essentially how it started. It escalated a lot from there. It was a very volatile. We're not talking about, a lot of people when they think about sex trafficking, they say, "Oh, it's just prostitution."
Right.
I said, "No, I don't think I ever walked a street
Right.
in my life." You know, it was a very sophisticated system.
Mhm.
um, you know, and these individuals who we were sold to would pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for us to
Did
have for a
you ever
couple hours or a whole day.
did you ever see any of that money?
No, no,
Right.
no, heck no. We were property. We didn't have any identity. Um, you know, they we're not human beings to them. Um,
I how in the world, you are the strongest person. How do
mm-mm.
you go to school every day? How do you play field hockey? How do you deal with, people and not for 4 years? What were you doing to cope with that?
You learn how to compartmentalize
Mhm.
um, when the lives of the people that you love are on the line. You're willing to do whatever it takes. And if at any point in time I were to break down or to tell someone or to try to get away, I knew that my family was in jeopardy. And people say, well, those are probably empty threats and all this stuff. But the thing is that when you, as a teenage girl,
Mhm.
see other teenage girls, some of them younger than me, go against what they want you to do and they're killed for it, you
Mhm.
start to believe what they're saying.
Of course.
It's not a joke. Like, it's not a bluff. And I saw uh, the first girl that I saw murdered was when I was 13 and a half. And she was probably 12 years old. Um, and they had no regard for any of it. It was, and it just kept happening over and over and over again. And so I said, I can't be like that. I'm not gonna be like that. I have to do what I have to do. And so when I went to school, you know, I had friends in school, and I had friends that I would hang with outside of school in my neighborhood, and they had no idea. They never knew.
Do you feel like you were being groomed by them?
Oh, definitely.
Is that right?
Yeah, towards the end of the process, I'd say the process it's towards the end of right before I escaped from trafficking. They were beginning the process because I was getting older of grooming me to meet other young girls
Mhm.
to gain their trust to get them into the system.
Mhm.
Um, and I knew that that was the end for me because I was fine with protecting myself
Right.
and I was okay with surviving because all I had to worry about was me
Right.
and my family. And then once I realized that I was going to be made to potentially harm other people, I was ready to die.
Mhm.
I was ready to say, "There's no way, and you're going to have to kill me because I'm not doing this anymore." And in a miraculous set of events from whomever higher power you believe in, I was in a horrific car accident um, when I was 18 years old on July 11th, 2007. And I ended up being so physically injured from this accident that I essentially escaped trafficking. I I wasn't good to anyone anymore. I wasn't worth anything because I was broken and damaged so bad. And they let me go. And what I mean by they let me go is they never asked me to be a part of that again, but they followed me for like 3 years after that. They broke into my parents' house and stole some things. They would leave threatening notes. They would leave. Uh, they would drive by in the car at my parents' house. Sometimes they would just sit in the street in the car
Right.
to keep that threat alive.
Mhm.
Until they felt satisfied that I was never going to tell anyone. Then it took about 3 years. Um,
We think about organized crime as this sort of either the drug cartels in South America or the mobsters of The Sopranos, or, gangs in, cities selling drugs. But this is a form of organized crime that I don't think people fully grasp the reality of, and it exists in our suburban, lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like something from a movie. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary set of events. And that's why I think I had trouble talking about it openly for so long,
Right.
is because I thought, who's going to believe what I'm saying? You know.
I mean, it's, well, of course, I hate that you had to think that, obviously, but it's just, I am hearing so much about trafficking on a regular basis, at this point, and about how prevalent it is in, you know, in Midlothian, Virginia, in Chesterfield County, in the counties outside of Richmond. Girls
Mm-hmm.
grow up in the suburbs with, families that, look like everybody's family. I mean, it's not, it's just, so what, it it just strikes me that this is a form of organized crime that, um that no one is paying attention to. um I
Well,
mean,
as a society, we love drama and we love stories about horrific events. I mean, look at the media. I blame the media for a lot of misconceptions about sex trafficking and human trafficking. Um, in movies, we glamorize, uh, sex trafficking by setting up the picture of the quintessential pimp and the working girls
right,
and the sex workers and stuff like that. And I believe that people have this picture in their mind of what sex trafficking is supposed to look like.
right,
And then what's even worse than that is that the survivors and the victims of sex trafficking are seen as people who grew up in environments, and some of this is true, but it's not true for everybody, that, they grew up in trailer parks or, impoverished areas, and who were addicted to drugs and, all this other stuff. And so we kind of bypass the importance of the human life
right.
because we're not adding any value to it as a society in the media, in other publications. We're
Right.
just saying,
We say, well, they must have, they came from the wrong side of the tracks. They must have done something to deserve this.
mm-hmm,
Their life is less valuable because they, came from, whatever, in unfortunate circumstances, as it were.
right. And then
That's not my language.
yeah, and then it becomes their fault.
Right, exactly. We blame the victim, and,
Yeah,
how could they have known better? How?
right.
Oh, those.
Why didn't you tell anybody? I mean, you were allowed. I've heard this. Oh my gosh. Sometimes when I've done trainings on sex trafficking, people ask, and I'm prepared for it now. So I don't get as much resentment going on, but they say, well, you got to go home and like be with your family and all this stuff. Like, why didn't you ever tell them? You know, why didn't you
Because I
run
was a child,
away?
and
I
very
was
dangerous people were threatening to kill them. That's
I was like, first of all, at 12 and 13 years old, I don't think I was cognitively prepared for the amount of abuse that I experienced. And then once you see that they're serious about their threats and you see 24 plus women murdered in front of your eyes over 4 years, you tell me if you're going to go up against that. You're going to jeopardize your entire family and your entire life, and you're terrified every day. You tell me what you do with that. Like, it's so insane to me.
that we would blame anybody in
Like,
that
it's
situation
so
for not
insane to
doing
me.
something different, right?
It's insane. So, but I never talked about my PTSD, but you can imagine where it came from.
Of course, absolutely. Well, so that's the next kind of, uh, I guess, direction in this conversation, is just, you find yourself, you know horribly injured from this car accident physically.
and
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine emotionally. And then, that compounded the already, intense abuse and trauma that you had been experiencing over the previous 4 years. What next? Where do you go from there?
Mm-hmm. I remember one time when I was in the hospital after the car accident. I was in the hospital for a lengthy period of time. I had I had shattered the tibial plateau in my left knee and cracked my kneecap. All of my ribs were broken. My pelvis was crushed. I had a punctured right lung. I was bleeding internally. All of this stuff, right? And so I'm in the hospital, and about 2 weeks in, um, this team of, I was at a teaching hospital, so this team of like 7 psychologists and psychiatrists come into my room, and they're like, the nurses are telling us that you feel like you want to die, and we're concerned about your mental health. So we want to put you on antidepressant. They put me on Wellbutrin, which has horrific side effects. In my experience, it did for me, because they said, well, you said you wanted to kill yourself. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm 18 years old. I've just escaped the most horrific experiences I've ever had in my entire life.
Right.
And I almost died in a car accident. And you're asking me if I'm depressed.
Right, of
And
course.
if I'm
No,
are you kidding me?
wonderful. I am so happy to have a pelvis right now.
I was just dumbfounded, and they put me on this Wellbutrin. And I remember I was on so many other drugs to combat the pain and the infections, potential infections, and all of this stuff. And they put Wellbutrin on top of that. And I was seeing double people. Like, I was seeing animals in the room. I was hallucinating. I couldn't have a roommate because I would cuss at them. And I didn't even know I was doing these things. And
oh my God.
it was an amazing experience, let me tell you.
It is indicative of how clueless we really are as human beings. I'm completely flabbergasted, although not in the least bit surprised.
Right.
At the same time, doctors and nurses and hospitals and doctors and nurses do wonderful things. And, I believe that today is National Nurses Appreciation Day or something like that. They're wonderful people. Your mother is a nurse. I'm not, belittling, but I do think that so often, we all do this. We exist so far above the human being that is experiencing the issue that we lose sense of the humanity of that person. And we look at this person as like a series of problems that need to be fixed. As opposed to, this is a living, breathing human being that has gone through a traumatic experience. And the first thing shouldn't be to accuse them of, being depressed in a terrible circumstance and then pump them full of drugs.
I just couldn't understand it. I said, well, why shouldn't I be depressed? I don't understand.
Don't you think, wouldn't I need medication if I wasn't depressed in this situation?
I'm like, I was confounded to a bed for 9 months because of the pelvic injury in my knee. And that was an exciting time in my life, because it's one thing to escape what I escaped and, be able-bodied to move on with my life and pick up the pieces. But I was confounded to a bed for 9 months. And so I had all the time in the world and all the drugs in the world to mess with my head to develop this amazing level of insanity, because I was just sitting in a twin bed in my parents' living room day after day after day. And I couldn't tell them.
And they didn't know.
And they didn't know.
What was going on inside your mind.
Right. So they're thinking, you know, oh, she's sad because of the accident. Like, and it's completely understandable.
Of course.
That the level of sadness that I was experiencing, and, you know, I did feel like I wanted to die a lot of times. They were like, oh, it's okay. You know, you're going to heal.
Right.
And they were looking at my body, and I'm thinking my mind is never going to heal,
Right.
you know, and that was rough. I wouldn't wish that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even wish that on the people that trafficked me. Like, that's the amount of pain that I felt at that point in time, mentally and physically, you know.
Mm. Wow. I mean, you are just saying what you just said, the not wishing that on the people that trafficked you. I think, you know, the thing that comes up for me is that if that would be the best punishment for them, to be forced to sit and be with the damage that they caused.
Yeah.
And not be able to move, and not be able to, you know,
then you compound that with the fact that I had no friends.
Right.
I had no one to visit me except my family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt completely alone and isolated. And I had a lot of people in my family that cared about me, and they were there for me, but it was such a difficult process. You know, but that if that's what had to save my life ultimately,
Right.
then that's what had to happen. And looking back on it now, you know, it was a horrific time in my life, but being able to remember that pain
Mm-hmm.
and being where I am now is worth everything.
Right.
It's worth everything I went through. You know, I am the type of person that likes to think that everything happens for a reason.
Right.
You know, I don't say why me anymore. I don't hold hatred and resentment towards the people that hurt me anymore. Because, you know, resentment is like poisoning yourself and hoping the other person dies.
Right. Exactly.
So it's not really, I learned early on that it wasn't worth it.
It doesn't help you. It's not going to serve you and moving forward in your life. And they clearly didn't care.
Hell no. They're not thinking about me. They're not, the only thing that they're concerned about is this girl going to talk, and, you know, but I never knew their names. I never knew where these other men came from. They were very good about keeping us in the dark, literally sometimes, you know, being blindfolded and forced to go to a place where we didn't know where we were, you know.
Wow.
Like long car rides with blindfolds over our faces, you know.
I can't, I truly cannot imagine, but I'm so grateful for that car accident. Hating to
It's a really weird thing to say.
Really weird thing to say. So you never heard from them again. They didn't check on you. They didn't come in and say, you know, did they wonder where you were? Who told them that you were in an accident? Do you know any of those things? This is sort of ancillary information, but
Right.
You know, these are all the questions that come up.
When I was in the car accident, the reason I was in that car was because I was going to a house that I was called to go to be transported to be trafficked again.
Mm-hmm.
So when I didn't show up, they started calling around. And one of the girls that I knew, she told them what happened to me because we had made a friendship. And I told her probably like 3 days later that, you know, I was in the hospital, you know, And my thought wasn't, I need to tell her so that she can tell them, so that I don't get in, like, that was my thought process. Tell her so she can tell them so I don't get in trouble for not being there. Because I was terrified that because I didn't show up, they were going to go to my house, you know. But they never contacted me directly face to face. They, you know, wrote letters that they would leave on the windshield of my car. Later on, you know, they broke into my parents' house.
Right.
They followed me to places, parked outside my house.
They just intimidated you.
They just intimidated me into being silent, and it worked for a very, very long time.
And so when you were mobile again, you were Pam, and the people in your life didn't know about this chapter, and you had recovered from the accident. So I imagine that everybody was looking at you like, all right, well, go out into the world and be a regular person now.
Go do stuff.
Go do stuff. Right. Move on with your life. And so, what happens then?
Well, the dream that I had for myself is completely different than the dreams that other people had for me.
Of course.
I was like,
isn't that always the way?
I just really want to survive. In any way that I have to do that, I'm going to do that. So I immersed myself I wanted to go back to school. So I went to school for paramedics. And that was something that I was passionate about, because I participated in a fire and EMS program in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to engage myself in other activities so that I had an excuse to not be trafficked.
Right.
Because they weren't so brazen to come to my school and take me.
Right, of course.
They had plenty of other women, or not women, excuse me, girls,
right.
To utilize. So I was like, I hate to say it like this, but it's just how it is. I was a big ticket item because I wasn't a girl that fought back. So I was taken to more high profile clients, men that were willing to pay like $5,000 to abuse me, so after that, I had an almost perfect score on my SATs. I had always been really intelligent. And I think that was a part of trying to salvage who I was.
Right.
I love to read and learn. And so I immersed myself in that. But unfortunately, I didn't finish paramedic school because I was, this is going to sound insane, I was sexually assaulted again by a massage therapist during the time that I was doing finals for my paramedics course. And I ended up failing out because I couldn't focus on the test.
How do you just not hate all men?
Well, it's the saddest part about it is that some of the biggest people that we had were women facilitating their spouse or person or whatever's obsessions. So I actually came out of trafficking being more distrusting of women than I was of men. Sometimes the girls would throw the other girls under the bus, so to say, because they wanted to survive. Yeah. So they would, tell our traffickers like, so-and-so said this and so-and-so did this, or, and so I didn't trust women at all. I was terrified. It took me until now in my life at 28 years old to make even one relationship with a female friend.
Right.
So I didn't hate men. I talked to men easily. I don't know. It's a very weird thing, but I trusted men. And I think it's because I knew so much about what they wanted,
right,
and what they were like and how to talk to them, because we were groomed for that.
Right. So you understood them.
Yeah. I feel like I've always understood men better than women. But so that happened. And so I didn't finish paramedic school, but I ended up going back to school again. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. So I've been in college straight for 7-8 years now. I'm finishing a master's in forensic psychology as we speak. And that has become one of my passions, is to obtain my doctorate in forensic psychology. and use my experience and intellect to help educate other people and also help perpetrators of these offenses, because it's not enough to just support survivors.
Right.
And I know that sounds crappy, because
No,
we
not at
want to
all.
have all these touchy feelings about, oh, we have to, we're going to support the survivors and help them rebuild their lives and all this stuff. But at
But
the end of the
perpetrators can
day,
be perpetrators for a reason.
yeah, at the end of the day, none of that matters, because, I mean, it matters, but none of that matters in the scheme of helping to end sex trafficking.
Right.
Because you have to go analyze and understand the reasons why this happens.
Right.
And there are multiple layers of the different reasons as to why this crime occurs. Money, um, people who are incredibly sick. And as a person who studies psychology, the more I learn and the more I immerse myself in trying to figure all of this out, I begin to understand the perpetrator.
Right.
And that for me brings power, is I understand you. I know who you are. And what can we do to understand the signs better, not be a silent society anymore, and, support the end of this. I know it's like the war on drugs, though there's always going to be drugs.
Right. Of
And
course.
there's always going to be the sex trade. But I have this like insane hope in my heart that we will end it someday.
Right.
It's going to stop.
Well,
And I want to be a part of that.
Well, and I think that what you're talking about is the way. Hopefully it happens in our lifetime. Hopefully, you are, at the forefront of that. But even if it takes 200 years, the fact of the matter is that in order to really solve a problem, you have to be able to look. You have to be willing to look at the problem from a 360-degree perspective. You have to look at all the pieces. You have to be completely honest with, yourself about what is the cause of this, and where are the places in society where, it is supported by virtue of people not looking at it completely, or not being willing to look at it at all.
Yeah.
Silence and willful ignorance are parts of the problems in sex trafficking, in systemic racism, in the ongoing sexual harassment and victimization, in so many of these areas, in the ways in which, in general, we treat mental health and disability in our society, and in most societies, is, that as a broken person, I don't have a responsibility to make sure their life is anything more than, meeting their basic needs.
Yeah. I mean,
and we just don't value human beings or the humanity of the people who are involved in these circumstances, and it has to change.
yeah, I mean, it almost feels like we live as bystanders.
Right.
We're all bystanders. And
And I just don't, gosh, that's so awful. I wish there was something I could do, except I'm not going to actually do it.
I'm not going to do anything about it. But that's so sad.
Yes.
And I'm so sorry that happens. Well, your sympathy is not enough
Exactly.
for me. And if that's all you have, then I don't want anything from you.
Right.
You keep your sympathy, please. I'm interested in people who are willing to take action, like you're doing, to help other people find their voice, to say, I'm not going to stay silent anymore. And you're not going to talk about me like I'm a broken person because I have complex PTSD and depression. And if you can't understand that I'm a human being that's worth what I'm saying and what I'm doing, then I don't need any of that.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, I can be some sort of, idealistic little artist person. and, you know, stand on stage and talk about my experience. But the fact of the matter is that my experience is not, obviously not encapsulating of all of the incredible breadth of experience that the people that, you know, I'm now getting to meet and invite to be a part of this project, uh, have and express to the world. And you are such an incredible advocate. You are so brilliant and
Oh,
so well spoken on all of these issues. And after all the trauma that you have experienced in your life, the fact that you have committed yourself to educating yourself to such a degree and being able to talk about all of these issues in such a complete way is such a gift to the world. Um, it's, I mean, talking to you is so inspiring and so enlightening. And I really, it sounds probably ridiculous, but I'm so grateful that I have had the opportunity to meet you through this process. And um,
well, I mean, like I've said before, I just feel honored to be a part of it. I mean, there are so many other amazing women that are a part of this project, and all of our stories and experiences are different. But one thing that we connect on is the pain that comes from experience, the stigma that society places against us.
mhm,
As you know, we already experience stigmas as women,
right,
um, you know, and some of the women who are participating in the project experience stigma based on their race and culture,
right,
you know, and then I'm excited to speak because I'm a civilian with complex PTSD, and a lot of people can't wrap their heads around that.
right.
You know, they think about PTSD and they go, oh, where'd you serve? And I'm like, that's not to discount you know, former military
Of
or
course.
current military that have PTSD, but there is a difference. And I wish that people saw that, you
Right.
know.
Well, and you know, the thing that I just keep coming back to is that, you know, there, and I, you know, however this is going to come out, it's going to come out, but we say, I wish that, you know, we all say that. People say, I wish the world was different. I wish that society saw things differently. I wish, I wish, I wish.
Mhm.
And like you said, it's not enough to wish.
No.
The job is that, you know, we create the space to feel comfortable saying these things out loud, and then we say them out loud.
Yeah,
And
I mean, when I talk about my experience, I always have this hope in my heart that someone's going to come up to me, and rather than saying, I'm so sorry that happened to you, I
right,
want them to say, how can I help?
right,
You know, what can I do as a person, even if, you know, you don't fully understand
hmm,
the issues, you know, have a willingness to learn, a willingness to open your mind, and then a willingness to say, what can I do to actually do something to help, you know. um,
well, you know, I do feel like we are in a moment where people are understanding their capacity to do more. You know, I mean, I can't say that, you know, it's everybody, and I can't say that it's, you know, that we're doing, you know, the whole world is going to be different tomorrow or in 6 months or in 10 years. But I do feel like we're in a moment where we are seeing action
mhm.
from people, and it's why I feel so compelled to do this work. I mean, I've felt compelled to do it for a long time, but I used to, you know, try and, you know, I used to put it out into the world and people would look at me like I had three heads, right? Like, what are you, like, they didn't understand the concept of, you know, I remember 10, 11 years ago, I reached out. I was working for a disability services organization, and I was trying to put together opportunities for people with disabilities to uh, uh, participate in arts recreation programs across the board, you know, over, you know, painting and dance and, and all of this, it's part of our humanity, the ability to be creative and whatever adaptive needs we have can be used, but this is something. And so trying to do this in Richmond, this was like the beginning of things for me, was trying to create these spaces for this particularly marginalized group to find its voice, these individuals to find their voices. And I called so many places and it was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Are they going to hit us? Is what one organization said.
Oh man.
We're not trained for that. I'm like, you're an artist and you teach children. You can't sit across from a person with a disability and draw with them. I don't understand. You don't need special training to sit across from another human being and show your humanity.
No, I mean, you weren't asking them to analyze their behavior and make,
I was not
reports.
Exactly. I'm not asking you to go into the special education department and completely overhaul it. I'm asking you to spend an hour with a person.
Right.
Doing the thing that you are trained to do. So
exactly.
By virtue of, that, you have the training that is necessary. But so much education was required. And so I realized that, and there were a few organizations and individuals in our area that were incredible. And they immediately jumped on and said, we'll do whatever needs to be done. We will, put in place the necessary, accommodations, and we'll make this happen. But I realized, from that experience, this is going to require a lot more education. This is going to require a lot more of me standing up and saying, all right, this is a human being.
Mm-hmm.
A what? A human being. A what? A human being. Right? And so, that was the beginning of this whole movement for me, is just, there have to be these spaces, and we have to meet people where they are, and we have to hope, sometimes against hope, that that people end up getting it.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't stop doing it. And I just am so incredibly grateful to you for being a part of this. So today you're still in school. You are working toward becoming Dr. Pam.
Dr. Pammy Cakes, as my friends like to say. I said, well, I don't think that sounds very professional, but if I ever wanted to be a child psychologist,
that's right.
I think I'd be okay if they called me Dr. Pammy Cakes.
I think you'd be like the most popular one.
Except for the fact that I have a deep dislike of children over the age of 1.
So probably not the best professional move for you. Maybe your friends can just continue with the nickname, and
yeah, that's fine.
Leave it there.
No, I'm really I'm struggling currently with I have a lot of anxiety about the rate at which I'm achieving these goals I've set for myself. I create all that stress by myself.
Right. Yeah.
I have this expectation that I'm going to be a successful psychologist and advocate and novelist and all of this other stuff by the time I'm 35 years old. And because but that's perpetuated by, I think, my mental state of the time that I lost.
Right.
I feel like I lost all this time.
Yes.
And so I have to prove my worth now.
Yes.
And so I work on that daily. I try to, do my daily gratitude lists and put myself in reality and cut myself some damn slack.
That's right.
I like, sometimes I just have to sit back and go, you know what, Pam, that's okay for today. Today, right. We're okay with what we've done, and you don't have to be anything more than you are right now. And it's really difficult. And one of the mantras that I use is everything's fine. Mm-hmm. That's the title of my book that I'm writing. And it's people say, well, that, when I say it, they're like, you're being sarcastic. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Everything is fine. And it's going to be fine because I say it's going to be fine. and we're going to get through it,
For years now, my mantra has been everything's okay, even when it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I can have faith that even in this moment, things feel like shit.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I do have faith. I have learned over, years of trying to, make it on this planet, that everything does end up okay.
Mm-hmm.
It may not end up amazing, but I'm still alive, and therefore I still have, next 10 minutes or tomorrow or next week or, whatever. I'm still here. And so everything's okay.
Yeah. I mean, one of my friends, an amazing friend from my recovery group, said to me one time, he said, Pam, I wake up every day and I say to myself, I expect everything is going to go terribly wrong. But my hope is that everything is amazing.
That's
And
right.
he's like, as long as my day falls somewhere in between there,
Then I'm okay.
then I'm okay.
Expect the worst and hope for the best.
I can't be disappointed.
That's right. It's so true. It's so true. And, I have been in our group, and this is like the last little part, and then we can part ways for the day. I'm sure you have stuff to do, but in our group, I have been so heartened by the space at the table for every individual's lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
That you have one set of experiences, and in any world your set of experiences is very extreme, and you lived through more than most people can imagine, and there is obviously space at that table for you and for your experience.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is, while we both broke our pelvises at around the same age in car accidents, the circumstances around mine were, the function of, teen mental health issues and, recklessness and, me just being sort of completely out of control. But from that also came, an experience of sort of, getting to, into my early 20s and feeling as if I had wasted an enormous amount of time. Not as the function of having been through, a comparable type of trauma, but the outcome is the same, in which you get to a point where you feel like you should have accomplished more in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't, and your sense of worthiness in the world begins to feel diminished, and then you have to talk yourself out of that, vicious cycle of, I am worthy and I will get there if I just keep showing up. And so I hear that in your, in our stories similarly.
Mm-hmm.
But with every single one of us, there's, everybody has a totally different experience, and there's space at the table for everyone. Some of us have very, very far reaching experiences, and others of us have, a lot of internal struggle that comes from, the function of, this is my mental illness and this is what it looks like. And, if I had grown up in Leave It to Beaver, it wouldn't have been any different. Right. And that is the thing that I love the most, and that I appreciate the most about this type of work, is that, no one at the table says, I'm more worthy of being here than you are, or I'm more worthy of my pain than you are. We all have it, and we have to figure out a way to get through it.
Right. Well, there's strength in, it's very cathartic for me to be at that table and be accepted for who I am, and to not be looked at as a damaged person who isn't capable of, doing what I'm doing. If anything, it's the opposite.
Right.
So that, I mean, the experiences that I've had, being able to be so open about my story for the first time in a long time is, it's amazing. And I'm tired of society trying to dictate where I should be in my life based on my age and my status.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I mean, everybody has their own timeline, and we just, we're just going to keep showing up every day and show the world that there's more than one right way to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we go, I want to press people to check out Amy's Place, allforamy.org. This is an organization, I'm reading from the website now. Amy's is an organization dedicated to bringing communities together through training and service. We offer employment and training opportunities to those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, mental illness, and physical impairments. So that's the beginning. That's from Pamela Hock, CEO. I'm so happy for you that you are, making the world better in this way as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a struggle. We're trying to get feet on the ground, raise money. It's a very difficult, process because you have this vision and you have this hope,
Right.
and you know what you want it to be. But I'm like, I just need society to get on board.
Right.
I need them to hear what I'm saying and go, I want to help.
Yes.
I want to be a contributor to this cause because I believe in it. I believe that all people of all abilities should have the opportunity to, express their independence and to grow. So, I mean, the main thing that started that is my love for my sister. And I asked her, when we started Amy's Place, I said, Amy, what do you think about, being able to have a job? And I wish that I would have captured that moment on video, because she looked at me and she got this big smile like she does, and she was laughing and she was like, I want a job. And she was like yelling in her excited way. And I was like, don't worry, you're going to have one. It might take me a minute, but you're going to have one, and everybody else should have one too. And we're going to do it.
Well, whatever I can do to help you get that off the ground, I am happy to help. And here we're getting the word out. And but my day job is in this world, so
Mm-hmm.
I am happy to spread the word and again, help however I can.
Oh yeah, thank you so much.
Pam, you are an amazing human being, and I am honored to know you. And I'm excited to hear your story on June 7th. Everybody mark your calendars, come see us, tell our stories, and show our photographs, and create this beautiful space for love and acceptance and compassion and self-compassion. And anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, I really want to thank you for doing what you're doing. I mean, like I said before, anyone in your position, you've written a book, you're a presence now, that people look up to, and instead of taking it all for yourself, you've chosen to give it.
That's, well,
And I'm just super honored. I'm sorry. Thank you.
oh, please don't apologize. I've got chills. You're making me cry.
It's too early for crying, Erin.
It's never too early for crying.
I usually cry at the end of the day.
Oh, I love you, friend.
I love you too.
I can't wait to see you next weekend at our group meeting. And thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you. I hope you have a